The wind on the spine of Verath did not care about anything. It did not care about survey deadlines. It did not care about anchor bolts or elevation charts or the 3 men and 1 woman trying to hold a measurement cable steady against a 40-meter drop. And it did not care about the titanium ring that slipped from Rael's finger while he braced both hands flat against the cold rock face to keep himself from sliding off the ledge. He did not feel it go. That was the worst part. One moment it was there, the faint familiar pressure around his left ring finger, the slight weight he had stopped noticing years ago the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. Then he looked down at his hand to check the chalk mark on the survey rod, and the finger was bare. He said nothing for a full 3 seconds. He just stared at his own hand like it had betrayed him. Rael, that was Bren, calling from the platform 2 meters above. She was clipped to the safety line, leaning over, watching the cable angle. Read me the depth marker. He did not answer. Rael, depth marker. Give me a moment. He heard her shift her weight. He could picture her expression without looking, the flat, patient look she used when she was deciding whether to push or wait. She chose to wait. He searched the ledge on his hands and knees. The rock here was gray and rough, full of small cracks and mineral chips that caught light and pretended to be metal. He checked every one. He checked the gap along the base of the rock face where grit had collected. He pulled back the sleeve of his work jacket and checked his cuff. He checked the survey bag, the front pocket, the side loop. Nothing. He stood up and looked down over the edge of the ledge. The drop fell into a jumble of boulders and dry scrub about 30 meters below. The wind moved through it, and nothing else did. Lost something? Bren asked from above. My ring. A pause. Your wedding ring. Yes. Another pause, shorter. Do you want to call a hold on the survey? He wanted to say no. A hold cost them daylight, and the survey team was already 2 days behind because of a weather delay last week. He had a responsibility to the bridge project and to the 3 other people on this ridge who were waiting on his numbers. He said, give me 10 more minutes. He searched the ledge again. He searched it a 3rd time. He went back up to the survey platform and searched there, moving equipment bags, checking under the transit tripod, lifting the corner of the foam pad they used to kneel on during long readings. He asked Don and Petra, the other 2 engineers, whether they had seen anything fall. They had not. After 10 minutes, Bren said, quietly, Rael. He stopped. He already knew it was gone. He had known it probably within the first minute. The ledge was narrow and the wind had been blowing outward all morning. The ring had gone over the edge, or down into a crack too deep to reach, or somewhere else entirely that he was not going to find before the light changed. He stood at the edge of the platform and looked out over the mountain. The spine of Verath was not beautiful in any comfortable way. It was enormous and old and completely uninterested in the humans who had built their colony at its base. The peaks ran north for 30 kilometers, the rock dark with mineral streaks, the upper slopes bare of everything except wind and the occasional cry of something flying too far up to see clearly. Bren climbed down to stand next to him. She did not say anything immediately, which was one of the things he respected most about her. It has an inscription inside, he said, not to her particularly, just to the air. 2 words. Still here. Bren nodded once. Sona's writing? Yes. He put his bare hand in his jacket pocket. She is off-world for another 3 weeks. Do you want to calm her? He thought about it. He thought about Sona answering from whatever habitat dome she was staying in at her sister's colony, tired from the time difference, and hearing that the ring she had pressed into his hand 12 years ago was somewhere at the bottom of a Drothy mountain. The ring she had chosen after the 2 years that almost ended them. The ring she had picked because titanium did not scratch easily and the inscription would last. Not yet, he said. They packed up the equipment. The sun was dropping and Bren had already noted, twice, that the survey ridge sat inside the outer edge of a Drothy nesting corridor. The colony's cultural liaison had been very clear when they filed the access permit. Clear the corridor by sundown. The Drothy had not raised any formal objection to the survey project, but that did not mean humans should push the boundaries of what had been agreed. Rael was the last one to the equipment lift. He stopped at the edge of the platform and looked back down at the ledge one final time. Something moved in the rocks far below. Small, quick, golden, a flash of color between 2 boulders that was gone before he could focus on it. Then something else caught the last low angle of sunlight and glinted, once, from a flat stone near the base of the rock face. He stared at the spot for a long moment. Then the lift cable pulled taut and Bryn called his name from above, and he turned away, carrying the weight of a bare finger all the way down the mountain. The beetle was very fast, and that made it interesting. Nura had been following it for nearly the full length of her allowed range, belly low to the warm rock, tail swishing behind her in a way her mother had specifically told her not to do because it knocked loose stones onto the lower ledges. She was trying to stop the tail. The tail had its own opinions. The beetle disappeared under a flat gray stone, and Nura sat back on her haunches and made a sound of deep personal offense. She was 3 seasons old, and the world was full of things that escaped just when they were getting interesting. She had learned this about beetles. She had also learned it about cloud moths, rock skippers, the small silver fish in the upper streams, and her own shadow, which she had chased enthusiastically for an entire afternoon before her mother had gently explained what shadows were. She looked back up the ridge to check how far she had come. The nest ledge was visible, a familiar dark line against the upper cliff. Her mother was there. She could feel the warmth of her presence without needing to see her, the same way she could feel sunlight through cloud. Dara's warmth was always there, steady as the mountain itself. Nura was allowed to the 3rd flat rock outcrop and no further. She looked at the 3rd flat rock outcrop. She looked at the area just past it. There was something on a stone just past the boundary. It was very small. It was round. It caught the light in a way that made something in Nura's chest pull forward, the way hunger pulled, but different. More like the feeling she got when she found a piece of quartz crystal and wanted to hold it and look at it for a long time. She sat at the boundary for a moment, doing the calculation that all 3 seasoned dragonlings do when they have been told not to go somewhere, and then find a reason to go there anyway. She went past the boundary. The stone it sat on was flat and still warm from the day's sun. She circled it twice, neck low, nostrils working. The smell was strange and new. Not rock, not plant, not prey. Something else. Something that breathed and moved and lived, but was not here anymore. A warm creature smell, she decided. The kind of smell that came from the settlement creatures, the soft-skinned ones her mother called humans, the ones who moved around the lower mountain carrying hard flat things and making measuring sounds. She touched the object with one claw tip, and it scraped against the stone with a tiny ringing noise. She flinched back, wings half spreading, and looked around as if something might have heard. Nothing had. She touched it again. Same sound. She decided she liked the sound. She batted it gently, and it spun on the flat rock, a perfect circle catching light on every turn. She batted it again, harder, and it went to the edge of the stone and stopped. She picked it up in her front paw and turned it over, peering at it with one eye and then the other. It was a ring. She did not have the word for ring. She had the sensation, smooth and closed and complete, with no beginning and no end. She put her nose through the middle of it, and that made her sneeze, which knocked it off her paw, and she had to search for it between 2 rocks for an embarrassing amount of time before she found it again. She held it between her front teeth very carefully. She knew her teeth were sharp, and she did not want to damage it, and breathed through her nose. The warm creature smell was strong here. Not one creature. 2. Both alive somewhere. One nearby, carrying a feeling she could not name, but that made the metal feel almost warm in her mouth, like something that had been held for a long time by something that loved it. Nura sat very still with the ring in her teeth and felt the feeling. In Drothy understanding, which Nura had not yet been taught, but carried in her bones the way she carried everything her bloodline knew. This feeling had a name. It was called thread weight. It was the feeling of an object that had been held by love long enough to remember it. The mountain elders said such objects did not fall by accident. They said thread-weight objects found their way to whomever was supposed to return them. Nura did not know any of that yet. She just knew the ring felt important, the way her mother felt important, the way the nest felt important. She knew what to do with important things. She had watched her mother do it. You carried them home. She spread her wings, still small, still a little uneven, with the left one slightly larger than the right in a way her mother said would correct itself by the 4th season. She crouched, she pushed, and she was airborne in a lurch of effort and wind, and the particular joy that flying always produced in her regardless of how many times she had done it. The flight back up to the nest ledge was the longest she had done alone. Her wings burned by the end. She landed messily, stumbling sideways into the rock wall, and scrambled upright with the dignity of someone who had definitely meant to do that. Her mother was waiting. Dara's great golden eyes moved from Nura's face to the object in her mouth and stayed there. Nura walked forward and set the ring down at her mother's feet. Then she sat back and looked up and chirped. One clear note, proud and hopeful. Dara did not speak for a long moment. She looked at the ring and then at her daughter, and something changed in her expression that Nura could not fully read yet. Not alarm, not anger, something older and more serious than either. She reached down and touched the ring once, gently, with the tip of one talon. Then she said, very quietly, in the deep Drothy tongue that Nura was still learning, "Where did you find this, little one?" Dara had lived on the spine of Varath for 61 years, and she had seen many things carried home by young dragonlings on their first solo ridge wanders. She had seen polished stones and bright feathers and the shed shells of ridge beetles and once, memorably, a live rock skipper that had then escaped into the nest and caused significant chaos for 3 days. Every young dragon brought something back. It was not trained into them. It simply happened, the way first flight happened, the way fire happened, a thing that waited inside them until the season was right. But she had never seen one bring back a human bonding token. She picked up the ring carefully and held it close to her eye. It was plain, which surprised her. Humans decorated everything, their buildings, their tools, their clothing. She had watched them from the upper ridges over the years and noticed that they seemed to feel better when things had markings on them. But this ring had no outside decoration, just smooth, even metal, gray-silver in color, unblemished except for a faint scratch along one side that looked old. She turned it and looked inside the band. There were marks there, small, precise, human script. She could not read it. She would need set for that. Nura was sitting very still, watching her mother with the focused attention of a young creature who knows it may have done something either wonderful or wrong and cannot yet tell which. Her copper-gold scales were slightly puffed, a sign of anxiety. Dara set the ring down on the flat ledge stone between them and looked at her daughter steadily. "Tell me exactly where," she said. Nura described it in the limited Drothy she had, gestures helping where words failed. The flat stone, the smell of a warm creature, the glinting, the feeling in her teeth when she picked it up. She described the feeling carefully, because her mother had always told her that feelings were the most important part of any description. Dara listened to the feeling part without interrupting. When Nura finished, Dara was quiet for a long time. The sun had gone fully behind the western peaks, and the ledge was cooling fast. From somewhere further up the cliff, the low, resonant sound of other Drothy settling for the night moved through the rock like a slow heartbeat. "Go to your sleeping spot," Dara said. "I will come soon." Nura went, but slowly, looking back twice. When she was settled and her eyes had closed, Dara picked up the ring again and carried it to the upper ledge where the clan's memory keeper slept. Set was very old. His scales had faded from their original deep amber to a pale sand color, and one of his horns had broken off in a storm 40 years ago and never fully grown back. He was awake when Dara arrived. Set was almost always awake. He said sleeping was for creatures who had not yet seen everything, and he had seen most things. He looked at the ring without touching it first. He breathed over it slowly, nostrils reading the scent layers the way a scholar reads pages. "Two warm creatures," he said. "One close, one far." "Yes," Dara said. "The one close is in distress." He touched the ring with one curved claw, very lightly. Not pain, loss, the feeling of something missing that should be present. Dara said nothing. She already knew. "The close one is the primary bond," Set continued. "The far one, also bonded to this metal, but the feeling is older. Settled. Content somewhere else for now." He lifted his head and looked at Dara with his faded yellow eyes. "A bonding token, and a strong one. This has been held every day for many years. You can feel it in the metal." "I know what it is," Dara said quietly. "I need to know what Nura's bringing of it means. By law." Set was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what it means. I want you to say it." He exhaled slowly, a sound like wind through a long tunnel. "The first object a youngling carries home on her first long solo flight is a soul thread. The clan's law is clear. The object carries the warmth of its origin. The youngling who found it has begun a thread between her life and the life of that origin. The thread is not yet complete. He paused. It must be returned. In person. By you as her elder. With the youngling present to witness the completion. Dara looked out over the edge of the cliff, down toward the valley where the human settlement sat quiet and lit with its small yellow lights. An elder has not gone to the settlement voluntarily in 11 years, she said. No, said Agreed. They will not know what to make of it. Probably not. He tilted his old head. Does that change the law? It did not. She had known that before she came to him. She looked at the ring in her palm one more time. Smooth and closed, and carrying its quiet weight of feeling. The human who had lost this was hurting tonight. Not dramatically, quietly, in the way people hurt when they lose something that was standing in for a larger thing they were afraid to lose. Dara closed her talons gently around the ring. In the morning, she would wake Nura. She would tell her that the thread she had started needed to be finished. And then she would take her daughter down the mountain, through the valley, and to the gate of the human settlement, and she would return what had been lost. It was not complicated. It was simply what was right. Rill did not sleep well. He lay on his bunk in the survey crew's temporary housing unit and stared at the ceiling and moved his thumb across his bare ring finger over and over without noticing he was doing it until he noticed it, and then stopped, and then started again a few minutes later. He had not come Sona. He had almost done it 4 times. Each time he had picked up the comm device and then set it back down, because he could not figure out how to say it in a way that did not sound like more than it was. He had lost a ring. He had not lost her. The ring could be replaced, theoretically. The inscription could be re-engraved on a new band, and it would say exactly the same words. But it would not be the same ring. It would not be the one she had pressed into his palm outside the registrar's office on a cold morning 12 years ago, with her fingers around his, and her eyes slightly red from the crying she had done the night before. Not sad crying, she had explained, just the kind of crying that happened when something important was finally, actually, completely all right. That ring was on a mountain in the dark, or in a crack, or at the bottom of a 30-meter drop. And he was here, turning a bare finger in the dark. He got up before sunrise and went back to the site. Alone, without telling Bran, which he knew was a safety protocol violation and did not particularly care about at that moment. He searched the ledge again by the light of a hand torch. He found 2 survey chalk marks, a loose bolt that needed replacing, and nothing else. He was back at the housing unit before Bran woke up, so she never found out, and he told himself that meant it did not count. By mid-morning the crew was back on the ridge doing secondary measurements, and nobody mentioned the ring. Rill appreciated that. He also noticed that both Don and Petra kept glancing at his left hand when they thought he was not watching, with the careful, worried expressions of people who did not know what to say and were trying to decide if they should say something anyway. He appreciated that too, even though it made him feel worse. It was Bren who came to find him just after the noon break with a look on her face that he had not seen before. Flat and careful, but with something underneath it. Devon just signaled the crew channel, she said. Devon was the colony's security coordinator, a large and practical man who communicated mostly in short sentences and standard procedure references. He wants you at the south gate. Now. Rail looked up from the transit reading. Why? Bren hesitated. Bren did not usually hesitate. A Drothy elder has come to the settlement. Voluntarily. She signaled the gate this morning in formal common and requested a meeting. She paused. She referenced the survey ridge by name and location. Devon thinks it involves you. He did not remember the walk to the south gate. He remembered arriving there and seeing that a small crowd had gathered outside the colony's south perimeter. Maybe 20 people, some of them workers on break, some of them administrators who had heard through the internal channel, all of them maintaining a careful distance from the gate and speaking to each other in low voices. Devon met him at the inner barrier. The man's face was professionally calm in the way it always was, but his eyes moved to Rail's bare left hand for just a fraction of a second before meeting his eyes. She is waiting outside, Devon said. She has been there for 2 hours. She did not demand entry. She simply said she would wait until the person who lost something on the survey ridge came to the gate. Rail looked through the gate. He had seen Drothy before. The colony had been on Verath for 30 years and formal contact was not rare. Trade negotiations, boundary meetings, the annual water rights review that both species representatives attended, and neither seemed to particularly enjoy. He had seen adult Drothy at those events. Large, formal, moving with the slow, deliberate weight of things that were not used to hurrying. He had not seen one like this up close before. She was waiting 10 meters outside the gate, perfectly still, in the way that very large and very confident creatures were still, not tense, not cautious, just present. Her scales were deep gold, darkening to amber along her spine, and her eyes were the color of old honey. She was enormous. She made the gate look like a garden fence. On her shoulder, clinging to the ridge of scales just below her neck, was the smallest dragon he had ever seen. Copper gold, with oversized wings folded against her back and eyes that were watching the gate with enormous curiosity and no fear at all. A young one. A baby, by any reasonable measure. The elder, Dara, Devon said her name was, watched Rail walk through the gate and stop a few meters away. The crowd behind him had gone very quiet. Dara inclined her great head. When she spoke, it was in careful, deliberate common, the kind of careful that came from someone who had learned it formally and was choosing each word before she used it. You lost something on the ridge, she said. Your youngling. She gestured with her chin toward the baby on her shoulder, who immediately perked up at being indicated. Found what your hands released. We have come to return the thread. The baby dragon opened her small mouth. She reached in with her tongue, careful as a jeweler, and pushed the ring forward between her front teeth until it sat right on the tip of her lower jaw. Then she looked at Rail with enormous copper-colored eyes, waiting. Dara held out her open talon beneath her daughter's chin. The baby set the ring into it with the gravity of someone completing a very important task they had been thinking about all morning. Dara extended her talon toward Rail. The ring sat in the center of her great scaled palm, untouched, undamaged, exactly as it had always been. Behind Rail, in the crowd, someone made a sound that was not quite a word. Rail's hand was not entirely steady when he reached out. He was aware of that. He was aware of the crowd behind him, and of Devon standing at the gate, and of the fact that he was a professional in his late 30s who had worked on 3 different worlds and dealt with delayed permits and budget overruns, and one genuinely alarming structural failure that had kept him awake for a week, and who was now, in front of 20 of his colleagues and a Drothy elder, struggling to keep his hand from shaking over a piece of metal. He picked the ring up from Dara's talon. It was warm, warmer than he expected from something that had spent a night on a mountain. He turned it in his fingers and looked at the inside of the band, at the 2 words inscribed there in Sona's small, careful handwriting, and he stopped trying to hold himself together in any particular way. He got it back onto his finger. It took him 2 tries. He stood there for a moment with his fist loosely closed and breathed. Dara waited. She did not look impatient. She looked like someone who understood that some moments needed a few seconds of room. Thank you, he said. The words felt completely inadequate and completely necessary at the same time. Dara tilted her head slightly. The inscription in the band, she said. We cannot read human script, but the metal carries the feeling of it. 2 words. My memory keeper said the feeling was like something being held in place. Something that chose to stay. Rail looked at her. Still here, he said. That is what it says. Still here, she repeated, as if weighing it. What does it mean for you? He considered lying or reducing it to something simple. He did not. Silence. Not uncomfortable. More like the silence after something has been set down carefully. Dara lowered her head slowly. Not a bow exactly, but a long, deliberate inclination, the way a mountain might lean towards something if mountains moved. Behind Rail, he heard someone draw in a quiet breath. He did not know until later that among Drothy, that gesture was reserved for things they considered deeply worthy of respect. He had never seen it directed at a human before. Most humans in the colony had never seen it at all. I will tell you something now, Dara said, lifting her head again. Not to explain what we have done, only so you understand what my daughter did, and what it means. She told him about the soul thread. She explained it plainly, without ceremony, as one practical person explaining a law to another. The first object a youngling carries home alone has weight. An object that carries the warmth of a living bond, between living people, has the most weight of all. The law said it must be returned. But the law also said something else. When the thread is begun by a youngling's finding and completed by an elder's returning, the 2 households become open to each other, Dara said. This is not an obligation. It is an offer. Our door. She gestured slightly upward, toward the spine, is open to you. Not because of trade or treaty. Because my daughter chose your ring. Rael looked at Nura. Nura had been watching him with the intense, unblinking attention of a creature who was very interested and also trying to look like she had always been this calm and dignified and had absolutely not spent the morning fidgeting on her mother's shoulder. Her copper-gold scales caught the afternoon light and threw it back in small moving pieces. She was, by any measure, the smallest and most serious thing he had ever seen. He held out his hand toward her, palm up. Slowly, not demanding, just offering the same space Dara had offered him a few minutes ago. Nura looked at his hand. She looked at her mother. Her mother said nothing. She looked back at his hand. She leaned forward from Dara's shoulder and stretched her neck out, careful, curious, and pressed her small flat nose against his palm. She breathed in. Then she made a sound that was somewhere between a chirp and a low rumble, a sound that seemed too large for her body and entirely genuine. Then she head-butted his palm with the side of her head, firmly, the way something does when it has decided you are acceptable. Rael laughed. He had not planned to laugh. It came out without permission, short and real, and it released something in his chest that had been held tight since the previous afternoon on the ridge. Behind him, the crowd was very still. He would find out later that Bryn had arrived at some point during the conversation and was standing at the back with her arms crossed and her jaw set in the expression she used when she was being absolutely unmoved by something and failing completely at it. Rael looked back at Dara. I would like that, he said. The open door. Both ways, if you would accept it. Dara regarded him for a moment with her old honey-colored eyes. Your wife, she said. When she returns. Bring her. He nodded. Dara made a sound then, low, resonant, like the first note of something longer. Nura immediately perked up and clambered back into position on her mother's shoulder with great enthusiasm and very little grace, grabbing a ridge of scales with both front claws to steady herself. Dara turned to go, then stopped. Without looking back, she said, The mountain did not take your ring, Rael. The mountain does not take things that are still needed. She walked back up the valley slope with the long, unhurried stride of something that had no reason to be in a hurry, her daughter balanced on her shoulder like a very small and very proud figurehead, until the rocks closed around them and they were gone. Rael stood at the gate for another minute. The crowd behind him began to break up quietly, in ones and twos. Nobody said anything to him, which was exactly right. He slid his thumb across the ring on his finger. There, warm, present, and finally, steadily, picked up his comm device and called his wife. 3 weeks passed the way the end of a long project passes, slowly until it did not, and then all at once. The bridge survey was completed. The numbers were good. Rael filed his report, received a message from the project director saying the structural plan was approved, and felt the particular hollow satisfaction of finishing something demanding that he would not be able to explain to anyone who had not done it. He packed his equipment, said his goodbyes to Dawn and Petra, and got a dry handshake from Bryn that lasted slightly longer than her handshakes usually did. He was back at the colony's main residential block when the transit shuttle from the outer station landed, and he was standing at the arrival dock when Sona came through the gate. She was exactly as she always was, which was the first thing he noticed every time she came back from somewhere. That no amount of absence changed her, that she was always precisely and recognizably herself. She had her travel bag over one shoulder and her hair pulled back, and she was already looking for him in the crowd, and when she found him she smiled in the way that had nothing performative about it. He had told her everything on the comm call 3 weeks ago. He had told her in the way he told her important things, without decorating it, without managing how it sounded, just the facts laid out in order. The ring, the ridge, the search, the gate. Dara, Nura. She had been silent for a long time. Long enough that he had checked the connection. Then she had said, very quietly, A baby dragon found our ring. Yes, he said. Another silence. Then she laughed, sudden and real, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep and surprised. It had gone on for a while. When it ended, she was also crying a little, which he had expected, because Sona felt things fully and without embarrassment about the order in which they arrived. I want to meet them, she said. Now she was here, and she was holding his hand as they walked back through the colony, and she kept glancing at the ring on his finger the way she had in the early years of their marriage. not checking that it was there, exactly, but just aware of it. Glad of it. Did you contact Dara? She asked. I sent a formal message through the colony's cultural office, he said. The way the protocol handbook says to do initial contact. Devon helped me get the wording right. And she replied in 2 sentences. She said, the door is open. Come when you are ready. Sona was quiet for a moment. 2 sentences. Drothy elders are not verbose, he said. She squeezed his hand. I like her already. Devon, for his part, had spent the 3 weeks doing what Devon did, which was documenting things and making sure procedures reflected reality. He had submitted a formal addendum to the colony's cultural protocol handbook, a single paragraph, which he had written and rewritten 6 times before he was satisfied. It said, in plain language, that voluntary contact from a Drothy elder or family group should be treated as a diplomatic event of the highest priority, not a security incident. It noted that such contact had occurred once in the past 11 years, and that the outcome had been the establishment of an open kinship offer between a Drothy clan and a human resident. It recommended that any future similar contact be met with immediate respect and the involvement of the contacted individual rather than security personnel. He had added, at the end, a single line that had no formal precedent in any protocol handbook, but that he felt needed to be there. If a Drothy youngling approaches the settlement carrying a human object, do not treat it as a territorial incident. Treat it as a gift being returned. The colony director had approved it without changes. There were other small changes. Nothing loud or official. The kind of changes that happen when something shifts underneath the surface and shows itself slowly in the way people behave. 2 Drothy who had never come down from the upper ridges before were seen sitting on a rock shelf above the colony's east field 3 days after Dara's visit, watching the construction work on the new water transfer station. They sat there for most of the morning. When the site supervisor noticed them and asked Devon what to do, Devon said to do nothing. They were watching. Watching was not a problem. The supervisor, a woman named Orla who had been on Verath for 8 years, set a pair of thermal cups on a flat rock at the edge of the work area. She did not know whether Drothy drank anything that humans drank. She simply felt that if someone was going to sit and watch you work all morning, the polite thing to do was acknowledge them. The cups went untouched. But the next morning, there was a small piece of shaped quartz sitting on the rock next to where the cups had been. Blue-white, polished smooth, about the size of a fist. It had not been there the night before. Orla put it on her desk. She kept it there. On the 14th day after Sona arrived back, Rael and Sona went up to the spine of Verath for the first time together. They went the long way, the walking path rather than the equipment lift, because Sona wanted to see the mountain properly. They arrived at the lower meeting ledge that Dara had indicated in her reply message, a wide natural platform about halfway up the first ridge, with a view of the entire valley below. Dara was there. Nura was there too, asleep in a patch of afternoon sun with her tail curled around her nose, which apparently canceled out any sense of formality the meeting might otherwise have had. Dara looked at Sona for a long moment. Then she said, "You chose the words." Sona looked at the ring on Rael's finger, then back at Dara. "Yes," she said. Dara inclined her head, that same slow, deliberate gesture Rael had seen at the gate. "They are good words," she said. "We do not have them exactly in our language, but we have something near them, a phrase that means the thing that almost was not, but is." Sona was quiet for a moment. Then, "That is better than my 2 words." "Your 2 words," Dara said, "were enough to be felt in metal. That is not nothing." Nura woke up at some point during this exchange and discovered Sona, which she handled by immediately climbing onto Sona's boot, sitting on it, and looking up at her with the expression of someone who has decided something and is waiting for the other party to catch up. Sona looked down at her. Then she looked at Rael. Then she looked back down at Nura. "Hello," she said. The sun moved over the spine and the shadows grew long, and the 4 of them stayed on the ledge as the valley below filled slowly with the blue of early evening. There was not much talking after a while. There did not need to be. Some things are complete without words. A ring returned, a door opened, a small copper dragon asleep on a human's boot like it is exactly where she is supposed to be. Which, as it turned out, it was.